Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and tonight I want to welcome the Parish of Rock back to the channel. We are continuing our Slade series. Tonight's episode 4, Old, New, and Borrowed and Blue, and Slade and Flame. Let's do it.
Grant is changing the world one track at a time on Grant's Rock Warehouse.
Hey, welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and look who's back. It is the Parish of Rock, and we are back for episode 4 in the Slade series. Now, Parish, I don't know if you've been following how the Slade series has been going, like in views. We've been getting, I'm very happy with this series.
Good.
Like they've been, okay, in my small little world of Grant's Rock Warehouse, if I get 1,000 views on a video, I'm just tickled. But these have all gotten way more, and they keep climbing all the time. So
just goes to show that Slade are slowly conquering America 40 years later, or 50 years later.
Evidently.
Yeah.
But I think this is one of those bands, and if anybody hasn't watched any of these shows yet, this is episode 4, so we're going through the whole catalog, going 2 records at a time. We're trying to turn you on to Slade. There's been many acts in the past that we've talked about, Kiss, Cheap Trick, Quiet Riot, that all have been very influenced by this band. And they never really took off in the States. So the Parish and I, we're just trying to do our part and just trying to turn you on to the band. So tonight, we're in 1974. And we are looking at Old, New, Borrowed, and Blue. Came out February 15th, 1974. Reached number 1 on the UK chart for 22 weeks. I'd say we're going to go into it. We're going to talk about it. Is this a record that you might want to check out? I would say yes, but we're going to discuss it. The other record we're looking at tonight is Slade in Flame. This came out November 29th, 1974. Peaked at number 6 on the UK album chart. Now, this was basically the soundtrack for a film. I have not seen the film. I know the Parish has seen the film, but we're going to talk about it. And anyway, I want to welcome the Parish of Rock. Parish, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Grant. Great to be back.
Yeah, well, this is a great series, so hopefully we can turn some more people on.
Favorite band.
Yeah. So, all right, start us off. Let's start talking.
Okay, well, I'm going to start us off from where we left off, which was November 72, and Slade are at their absolute height. The album Slade was a number 1, and we went through that on the last episode. And then they went through a series of singles. So Come On Feel the Noise was released as a single early 73, straight in at number 1. Squeeze Me, and everybody knows Come On Feel the Noise, obviously, because not least
Quiet
the
Riot.
Quiet Riot.
Of course.
Exactly. And there's not a lot of difference. So there's a slight difference, but it's very similar. Then the next song, Squeeze Me, Please Me, also single only, went straight in at number 1. And actually, that's one of my favorite Slade songs. It's a little bit different, but it's just I think a fantastic, just a fantastic single, really. After that came My Friend Stan, which we're going to talk about because that's on Old, New, Borrowed and Blue, and that got to number 2 in the charts. And whilst that's all going on, Don Powell in July 73 has a serious car accident. So serious that he's in a coma for about six weeks, and his girlfriend at the time is killed in the car crash. And Don Powell is out of action for about 10 weeks or more. He broke both his ankles, damaged a number of ribs, and has ever since has a short-term memory problem. So I heard him talk on the radio a few years ago, and he said he had to get the drum patterns for the songs into his long-term memory because he was finding every gig he was having to try to remember, almost go back to the beginning and replay it as if he'd never heard the song again because his short-term memory was shot. So that happened, right? So if you think about it, it's end of 72, Slade at the biggest they've ever, but some would say as big as the Beatles in the UK. Songs going straight in at number one, can't do anything wrong. And then they have that major car crash. Weren't sure if Don Powell was going to pull through and would be able to play. And Slade are on record saying that if he hadn't, they would have stopped. They would have quit.
Well, you know, you say that because that was 72. We're in 74 before we have
doing. So
there's a lot of
there's a whole year where they didn't release a new album. Well, didn't release a new studio, sort of new material album. So they're releasing the singles. Just as an aside, it does make you wonder whether Def Leppard, who were Slade fans, went a bit too far with Rick Allen having a car crash. And
I hope they weren't trying to duplicate things.
Emulating, what's the word? Can't think of the word now.
Emulating?
That's it, yeah, emulating. There's one thing emulating your heroes, but I think that's a step too far.
But you know what? Think about it. That's a big, think about it. We're talking the early 70s. That's an awful big gap to not really have like a, the record companies back then, especially like in the UK, we want to have 2 albums, 3 albums a year. And that's quite a span of time before.
Well, what they did to actually better, I don't know if you can see that. Is that coming out? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
so what they did is
they
released the greatest hits album, Slade. Sladist, which has got all of the, and bearing in mind a lot of the singles weren't on albums. Then actually, if you want something that's got the singles, that's definitely worth getting, and that's got on it. Look What You've Done, Take Me Back Home, Mama, We're All Crazy Now, Goodbye to Jane, Come On Feel the Noise, Squeeze Me, Please Me, Get Down, Get With It, Cause I Love You, etc. So even though a lot of those songs aren't on albums, that's like an early greatest hits that they put out just to be able to keep the fans. And again, I don't know if you can see that, but a great live shot in the back of the band.
Yeah. I don't think I have that. I've got the BMG CD of that, the reissue,
and then
the latest reissue campaign.
Yeah, and then there's a sort of a booklet that came in it. Very
yeah, that's cool.
Very sort of magical mystery tour kind of idea with the booklet. So they did that to keep things going. And then the first thing they did when Don Powell was back, they in a heat wave in New York in the middle of August, they went and recorded in a studio, Merry Christmas, Everybody. So you can imagine in a heat wave, they're recording a Christmas song.
Hey, whatever it takes.
Whatever. And that went to number one, released December 73, went to number one. It's probably the song everybody still knows Slade for over here in the UK. It's on the radio all the time over Christmas. And was their last number one, but went to number. So that's kind of what happened through 73, which is why there's a big gap between November 72 and February 74 when this album comes out. So that's just, as I say, just kind of bridging the gap, really.
I still kind of look at Slade as a singles band. So, I mean, that might have sustained them because I don't know how they were viewed back in the day as far as, because, what's this, the 4th album, but were they more viewed as a singles band as opposed to an album?
I think so. But I think a lot of bands were back then. I mean, just think for a moment, a lot of the singles aren't on the album. So they almost had parallel careers with the singles coming out and then the albums coming out separately. But to be fair, Sweet were the same. A lot of Sweet singles didn't appear on any albums. T-Rex were the same. A lot of their songs didn't appear on any albums. You'd say the same about Susie Quattro. So there was definitely sort of a lot of bands were more focused on the singles charts. And even when you get into the late 70s, you still got that with bands like The Jam. I mean, half of the Jam singles never appeared on an album. So I just think it was a different. And then you've got other bands like Led Zeppelin that had absolutely no interest in the singles chart at all. In fact, didn't release any singles in the UK, just focused on the album. So there definitely bands were polarized between whether they were a singles band or an album band.
Yeah. Well, I think it definitely sustained them and kind of bridged them, even though, Don was out of commission. So I think that was
I think
kinda
they had a
helped.
few of those singles in the bag, already, so they could release
Probably.
them. But yeah, still quite a traumatic period right at the peak of their stardom, really.
Yeah, 100%. So anyway, so old new. Okay, so the Christmas single was recorded.
Yeah,
Was this album the next thing that came out?
this was the next thing that came out. Yes.
Okay. So was this record? I really don't know much about how this was recorded. So was this recorded after the Christmas single, or was this kind of being worked on?
It was
Or
it was recorded after the Christmas single,
okay.
but the first single off the album was actually released before the Christmas single, because obviously the Christmas single could only come out in December. So they recorded this, released a single off this album, and then released the Christmas single.
Okay. So this came out February 1974. Like I said, it got to #1 on the charts. Old, New, Borrowed, and Blue, that's the 4th album. And when we look at all the releases so far as albums go, this was the most successful one.
Yeah.
I don't know. Parish. Oh, look at yeah, look at that. Yeah, I've got the CD, and the new reissue CD that came out several years ago probably has most of the same photos in there, I would imagine.
Gatefold, all the similar sort of stuff.
Yeah, look at this. Look at this band shot.
Yeah.
Very nice. But all these reissues, now none of these really were released. You can get them on Amazon and stuff, but there hasn't been any domestic really releases. You have to go to Amazon and order them and get them that way. But I don't know. What's your thoughts on this record after this break and all these singles? What do you think of this record?
Well, this is one of the hardest assignments I've ever had on one of these shows.
Oh,
because I've known and loved this album since the day it came out. So I can't hear this other than hearing it as a 10-year-old boy, being really excited by it, thinking it's the best thing I've ever had. I got it. Well, it was my brother's birthday actually in February, but for some reason my parents bought me this and he had a birthday present, but I had this almost as my present for his birthday. And I've had it ever since I was 10. I mean, that album there, even though it's a bit broken around the edges, is the version
the original.
The original version, yeah. So it's hard for me to hear this other than how I've always heard it, which I just think it's. I'm giving the game away, but I just think it's a brilliant album.
So when you listen to this compared to the records that we looked at, can you see how has Slade changed from what they were doing before to this? How was the musical growth? How do you look at this?
I think this is the album where they found their sound. I think they had it on Slade, the one before, but it was still quite raw, and it was still quite sort of based on trying to take a live sound and put it into a studio. Whereas this one, I think, is actually quite a mature album, sounds like they've recorded it as a studio album rather than trying to record live in a studio, if that makes sense. So I think this is more subtle, and I think it's got more maturity behind it. But there's no doubt about it. It's still got all the hallmarks about what I like about it.
So would you say that this sounds more like a lot of bands, instead of like a collection of singles or just a collection of tracks, do you look at this record as more of an album?
Yeah, I think
when I listen to it, I think the sequencing's great. I think you can have one song that, all right, basically sounds almost power pop, and then you can have something that is much heavier. It seems like something that Quiet Riot would cover. I'm just throwing it out there. But it seems like on my end, when I'm listening to it, it just seems like everything fits together perfectly.
It does. Yeah.
That's the way I look at it. But I mean, you've got glam rock, you've got pop, you've got just basic rock and roll. When I listen to this, Parish, I do still hear a lot of Roy Wood. Now, I don't know if it's just because they were contemporaries and they were putting stuff out. But I hear a lot of, well, maybe, of course, we're talking 74. The move is over. But I still do hear a lot of that influence. And I don't know if they were ever influenced by the move or Roy Wood or anything, but I hear a lot of them.
They came from the same neck of the woods, didn't they? So they come from the Black Country. So in the case of Slade from Wolverhampton, in the case of Roy Wood from Birmingham, but they come from the same area. They would have been brought up listening to the same bands in the late 50s, early 60s. They would have toured the same clubs in and around Birmingham. And as I said before, regarding Robert Plant actually auditioned for Slade. It's just Robert Plant says he turned them down, and Slade say they turned him down. But the fact is, he still auditioned for them. And Noddy Holder and Robert Plant are great friends, great sort of jokingly rivals. So it's not surprising there's similarities going on. And then of course what you've got is what's also going on at this time is what are people buying? And if they're buying a particular style of music, then of course you kind of lean towards that in what you're doing. So I think there's a lot of reasons why they're similar. And of course, when you look at what Roy Wood did with Wizard, if you actually watched Wizard on, say, Top of the Pops and the way he looked, he's almost Slade have glammed up, and you would say to an extreme, and then you look at Roy Wood and you'd go, he's taking it to an even further extreme. So again, it's almost as if they're trying to outdo each other. On Top of the Pops. So so from my point of view as a 10-year-old boy, I loved it. I loved all of that. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, I was just looking through, doing research for this show, because even though that you were very familiar with this record, this whole Slade series to me is a bit of a discovery. I'm kind of going through the catalog, and I've never heard this record. I mean, I've been playing it because I've been prepping it, but this is just like a whole new discovery for me. But looking at some of these older reviews, it seems like from back in the day, this record got, a lot of the reviews that I saw were very enthusiastic, and they thought that this was probably maybe the peak for Slade, one of their best records. And I'm assuming since you like this so much, you probably would have to.
I would think amongst Slade fans, the chances are this is not the favourite Slade album. It's certainly in the top two.
There. What would be the? Was there a favorite that you could?
Well, I think it's either this or the next one. No, I think it's between. You'll see a lot of Slade fans liking Slade Alive, which we covered.
Yeah.
Last episode. Or you've got quite a lot that will say that one we're going to talk about in a minute, In Flame, is their favourite. But there's no doubt this is up there with most Slade fans.
Yeah, I think. When I listen to this record, I think that the songwriting has improved. Not that they had any issues with songwriting, but they seem like a little bit more mature. I think the lyrics are really great. The melodies on this record, as soon as you hear it, I think it really takes hold. This isn't a record where you look at it and you have to re-listen to it over and over to get it. It's instantly attainable, and it's just very catchy, and the production's good. Chas Chandler's production is wonderful. I wish I really could complain about this album, but so far, now we've looked at Slade Alive, and that's a live album. Okay, I get what it is, but as a real studio album, so far this is my favorite. We haven't looked at the next record yet, but I think as far as Slade goes, I think they keep improving. That's basically what I'm trying to go for. I think this is the best one so far.
Before we go on to talking about the tracks, I've just got I can't help but point out Dave Hill's fringe on the front of that album. I mean, look at it. Look
fringe.
His fringe on his hair. Look at that. I mean, it's like his mum has put a pudding bowl on top of his head and cut his hair or something. It's just.
Dave was extreme. He was
Yeah, I just think, I mean, it just makes me laugh every time I see it.
well, the whole band used to laugh at him because he'd go and he'd prep before a show, and
Yeah.
they never knew how he was going to come out. And what was the quote? You know, he said, "You guys write the songs. I'll take care of the image and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
You write the songs and I'll sell them, kind of thing.
I'll sell them." That's the quote.
Yeah. But I mean, the reason it makes me laugh is that they're trying to look so serious, aren't they, on that front cover? And yet you can't take them seriously because of his haircut.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, we were talking about reviews. I'm just kind of going through my notes. I don't know. Are there any particular tracks that stand out to you?
Yeah, there's a few. I mean,
record?
the first real standout is the second song for me, When the Lights Are Out, which I think is just such a great power pop song, really.
Absolutely.
It's and the other thing that's interesting on it is Jim Lea sings it, not Noddy Holder.
But there's something about the songwriting on that. I think it's a bit of a departure.
Yeah.
It's catchy. It grabs you right at the beginning. And we're talking, well, we're in 74. You might not think it's power pop. I mean, depends if Steve here. He might be judgmental. He might not think it is, but when I hear it, I think it's totally power pop. And that's not the only track on here like that. So
no, and of course Cheap Trick did a version of it. I'm trying to think which album, but in the 2000s. Was it the latest that is on?
I think it might be the
Is
latest.
It the album the latest? I think it's on the latest.
I'd have to go pull it, but I think it was.
And they do a really good version of it, to be fair. I think it's really good. But
think about Cheap Trick, though. Think about Cheap Trick, Parish. They were very influenced by Cheap Trick. You can listen to any Cheap Trick track and you can hear Slade. You know that they loved them. So that's a great track.
The next one I would highlight is Find Yourself a Rainbow, because it's very different to the rest of the album. It's almost old music hall kind of thing, the sort of thing that Queen might put on one of their albums at that same sort of time.
It could be right on Night at the Opera.
It could well be, that 1920s influence. Now they I won't say they did it first because they were both doing it about the same time, but I find that's quite interesting. Miles Out to Sea, I think, is another good pop rock song. I think that's very catchy, and it's got probably my favorite Slade song of all on the album, which is Every Day. So the ballad Every Day, which maybe is not what, if you only know Slade for the up tempo rockers, it's different to that. But Every Day is, I just think, a brilliant ballad. It's one of those where at the concert everybody's out with their with their scarves and or with their, back in the day with the lighters. Everybody's singing along to it. It was a number 2 single over here. Didn't quite get to number 1.
I mean, you could look at it.
One of my favorite Slade songs.
Who was playing piano on it? Did any of those guys play piano?
Well, live it was Jim Lea, but I'm not sure it was Jim on the album. I've got the notes of who plays.
I mean, it's almost
it's Jim Lea. On the album, it's Jim Lea.
Okay. But it's a little bit of a departure because you don't really expect Slade to be doing like a piano ballad.
No,
but then it's kind of heavy on the vocals too, though.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have Parish. I have no issue with it. So I'm just saying.
And then you've got a bit of a novelty song, but again, it was a single and a number 2 hit in My Friend Stan, which I've always thought was quite an amusing song. And a bit different, again, not maybe typical Slade. It just shows their sense of humor.
Yeah, when you mention Stan, I keep thinking, I don't know if that's a tribute to the Small Faces, but I keep thinking Ogden's Nut Gone because he mentioned Stan. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
But another piano-driven song though. So
yeah, that seems to be the trend on this record. Great stuff. I love it. Now the CD. This has a lot of bonus tracks.
I was going to say it's got a couple of great bonus tracks on it. So it's got "Arm Me, Arm Now, and That's All." I think that was a B-side.
Okay.
Of "Come On Feel the Noise," and then it's got "Kill 'Em at the Hot Club Tonight," which I think is a brilliant song, and that was the B-side of "Please Me, Squeeze Me, Please Me." So
it seems like they put a lot of B-sides on the.
Yeah.
Probably stuff that didn't make it on that compilation that they had out before.
Yeah, I don't think they're on the compilation. So, well, and because I'm going through the songs I really like, "Do We Still Do It" is another one I think is really good, with the sort of the backing vocals, and then the Noddy Holder in the chorus sort of responding to the backing vocals. So you kind of got a call and response type of thing on that one. I think that's a great song as well. I mean, to be honest, I could go through every song and just tell you how much I like them.
So what would you, well, you really like this record quite a bit. What would you rate this out of 10?
9.5.
Ooh, that's pretty damn good. I would give this a solid 9. So far, this is my favorite. I can't really. If you can go get it, just go get it. If you're a physical media person, just go get it.
And it is available. I mean, it's out. It's out there.
Yeah.
And if you can't get it, and you really want it, let Grant know, and I'll get it for you, because I've got about 5 different.
You got
versions.
5 copies of it?
I've got 5 copies of the CD. Because I keep forgetting I've already got it, and I just go and buy it again.
Well, Parish, you buy 5 of them. I think if you bought it twice, it would register.
You'd think, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, but the thing is, here in the States, you never see that.
No,
you never see it.
I'm getting old though, Grant. I mean, mine's going.
I'm getting
and
old.
I see it, and I go, "Look, what's on there? That's good." And then I bring it home, and I realise I've already got several copies.
All right. Well, there you go. So the next record. Well, we're gonna talk. Go flip up to my notes. We're gonna go with. So anyway, we agree that this is a must-have record. Slade and Flame, 1974. This came out in November 74. Got up to number 6 in the UK album chart. Now, I haven't seen the film. I've seen bits and pieces of it, but this, quote unquote, is the soundtrack to the film of the same name. So,
yeah.
When was the film? When did the film get released? Did it come out in 74?
About the same time? So it came out about the same. So it's not the film you think it would be, and I think that was part of the problem. I mean, I went and saw the film, even though I shouldn't have done. I was too young. But
I need to change the graphic. Jesus, rookie.
I was smuggled in by both my older brothers with them, and you would imagine with Slade, who are quite, an upbeat, good-humoured band, that the film would be something along the lines of Hard Day's Night or Help, or at least a sort of an updated version of that kind of thing. And this isn't that at all. This is a gritty take on the music industry in the 60s and 70s, and is quite depressing, actually. I was shocked. I came out. I remember at the time, couldn't believe it. It certainly wasn't the film I was expecting, and I think a lot of people was the same way. It got critical success at the time, but it flopped as a film because people was expecting one thing and it was something very different. And I think the other thing with it is it got to number 6. I think if the film had been, I think if it hadn't been a soundtrack and it had just been released as an album, it probably got to number 1. But I think quite a few people were put off by the film, and I think the film was part of their downfall. I think it. So
you think that? Well, you could possibly say that they jumped the shark with the film. The film, because the record didn't perform quite as well. Do you think they could never regain that momentum? I think they stopped being a singles band aimed at teenagers, and they lost that audience. But they were never going to gain
the sort of serious band audience of maybe late teens, early 20s. So it was a big bomb for them. Having said that, though, it is now acclaimed as one of the best, if not the best, sort of music film of all time. I mean, over here, NME, Q Magazine, which is another sort of music magazine, they all quote this as the best music film of all time. And if I'm watching it now, I think it's fantastic. It's really good. It's just it's just not what people were expecting or wanted of Slade when it was released. They thought they were going to get Help, and they got Saturday Night Fever, but even more depressing kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I guess they were trying to portray the way the music industry was then. Maybe it wasn't.
Well, they did, and they picked the film. I mean, they actually went out and asked people to write a sort of a film storyboard kind of thing, and then they looked at them all and they picked this one as the one they wanted to do. And Noddy Holder says that they picked it because they wanted to try to do something different. They wanted to move forward with their career, and I suppose from that point of view, it was something different. But and the other thing it shows actually is that they were good actors as well, because they weren't just being themselves on stage, or they were actually properly acting. So,
well, the other thing, when I listen to this record, it seems like compared to the previous record, it seems like, I know we're still in 1974, but I do think that there was a bit of a creative shift. It seems like they're moving away from that quote unquote glam rock type of thing, and they're much more introspective, much more mature. I don't know. How do you look at this record compared to what came before?
I think it's what's difficult is it different because they were writing a soundtrack, or is it different because Slade had moved on? And I don't know is the answer, because there's quite a lot of people who write soundtracks, and the soundtrack sounds quite different to their normal musical style. But at the same time, when you listen to the albums that come later, you can see the progression from Old, New, Borrowed and Blue, and then through to the album after this, which is Nobody's Fault. So I think the answer is a bit of both. They were writing a soundtrack, so it sounds a bit different, but I think it was the progression they were going in anyway.
So for someone who hasn't seen the film, I've just seen clips. Was this really, do you look at this really as a soundtrack album, or does it stand apart as just like a Slade album? I mean, it says Slade and Flame, but it doesn't say from the soundtrack of, you know what I mean?
No, so Flame is the band they play in the film. So it's arguable whether the film's called Slade in Flame or whether the film was just called Flame, because all we ever saw was that Slade in Flame kind of logo. And I always thought the film was just called Flame, and they were just advertising the fact that Slade appear in it. But now it is referred to as Slade in Flame as the album. So,
if you compare to this, like the Beatles' Help soundtrack,
yeah,
or Hard Day's Night, you've got like half of a record that's got like soundtrack songs, the other half is, well, that's the way it was more here in the States. I don't think the Beatles, when they did their quote unquote soundtracks, I mean, those songs appeared in the film, but
I think
it could have been any Beatles song.
I think what it's more similar to is Magical Mystery Tour,
okay,
where I think they did write a bit of a soundtrack for that TV movie, which is why you get some things that I think, certainly in my eyes anyway, sound a little bit different to what else they were doing. Something like I Am the Walrus fits because of what's going on in the film. It doesn't make any sense at all if you listen to it without knowing what's going on in the movie.
100%.
So I would say this is a bit like that. I mean, you can listen to it as a standalone album, and I suspect most people do, and never watch the film. But certainly the songs fit well in the film. And I'd definitely recommend watching it, even if you don't like Slade or you've never seen Slade, heard anything from Slade. It's just a really good film. and certainly a good snapshot of what allegedly what life was like in a band from the 60s through to the early 70s.
So if we are talking a band from the 60s, the music is going to reflect more of that time period.
Yeah. Yes.
So that might be why it's like more a pop or folk influenced.
Yeah. And I think there is 60, a few of the songs have got a bit of a 60s psychedelic sound to them. Because basically the band forms in the early 60s and breaks up in the early 70s.
So did they produce any singles in between?
No.
All right. So they're okay.
So the first single after Old New Borrowed and Blue was Far, Far Away.
I think they got to number two.
And was their last top 10 hit until 1981.
So, well, we could contribute that to the film. I'm not going to say it was a failure. Well, kind of. But that's their last top 10 hit. So everything after that just fell outside of the...
Yeah. So How Does It Feel, which is on this album, got to number 15. And then there was a few songs off the Nobody's Fool album that kind of got in the top 20, but not in the top 10. And then the next single that got in the top 10 was We'll Bring the House Down in 1981. So
that just seems like such a big... It just almost thinks when we're looking
back
at
then.
this, I know, but it seems like Slade, for as big as they were, Parish, just seemed to have like a little window. Where the Beatles, good 10-year run, no problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But Slade seemed, even though they were gigantic, it seemed like they had such a small.
But I don't know if it's the same in the States at the time, but I would say
no one cared about them here.
No, I don't mean Slade, but just generally. I think the bands of the early 70s, most of those bands had a 3 or 4 year run. So going back to the ones we spoke about, Sweets, T-Rex, Slade, they kind of disappeared by about 75. And then you got bands coming into the late 70s, like like the new wave type bands, and they had a 5-year run really, and then they disappeared. And then you had the new romantics. So certainly over here, it seemed to be a 5-year cycle for bands, and some outlived that. Bowie and Elton John and Rod Stewart, but not many. Most of them
were right on the cusp of punk too.
Yeah,
we're getting very close, and there's no way Slade. The whole. Well, I don't have to tell you, but there's no way Slade can compete with the whole punk rock movement.
Well,
Sex Pistols, The Clash.
It's funny, really, because Slade also disappeared to the States. They actually moved over to America, and were over there 3 years constantly touring, trying to break it. So they weren't really released. I mean, there's a 18-month gap between In Flame and Nobody's Fool, and whilst nowadays you'd say that's quite quick, back then, when most bands are releasing albums 2 a year, I mean that was a huge gap to be 18 months.
Career suicide, as far as I'm concerned.
And there wasn't really any singles released during that period, so they just got forgotten about. And they came back thinking that they would come back and everybody would welcome them with open arms, and they'd been forgotten and people had moved on. And as you say, punk was come in and new wave was in, and people just weren't interested. Now, lucky for Slade, quite a few punk fans, including myself, had been brought up on Slade, so they actually got a bit of, in the period when they weren't particularly well known, in sort of 76, 77, 78, you go to a Slade gig and most of the people there were punks. There were small gigs. They were sort of playing clubs as opposed to concert halls, but yeah, I would say the punk fans kind of kept them going during that period, just because they were, as I say, they were like me, kids had grown up listening to them, and of course they're loud and they're Noddy's voice, it kind of, and they weren't daft as a band. If they were playing to punks, they kind of revved it up even more.
Yeah, I could see
And then,
that.
and then in the 80s, when it was heavy metal back fans that sort of started listening and buying the records, they then became a bit of a heavy metal band for a couple of albums. So they weren't slow
It
in.
wouldn't be hard for them to stretch into that realm because
Exactly.
think about everybody that they produce. So how do you look at this record compared to what came before?
I think it's up there. I mean, the thing for most of my life, I would say I preferred old, new, borrowed and blue. But in recent years, I've really grown to love this album.
Yeah.
So this is definitely up there. Yeah. So I think if asked today, I would probably say this is my favorite Slade album.
Oh,
But
okay.
But a couple of years ago I wouldn't, and probably maybe in a couple of years' time I won't. I mean, the other problem, and you know what it's like, Grant, when you like an album as a lot, sometimes you just play it too much, and it's quite nice to listen to something that's is a different sound. So
yeah, I just think that they've matured. But yeah, I get the whole thing where some of these tracks still have to have that kind of that 60s element because it's taking place in the 60s. But I think they've matured. Is it as good as Old, Nude, Borrowed, and Blue? Almost.
Yeah.
But I don't see really any issues with quality in the songwriting, the production. It's just like another Slade record. It's just a little bit different, and they've grown some. Just looking at my notes here. I mean, I'm just looking at some of the old reviews, and most of the reviews from that time period, they give it, well, it doesn't rate quite as high as the other album, but for the most part, everybody has, from what I've read, love the record, love the songwriting, think it's excellent, it's a classic, and they're growing as a band. So,
and I would even add to that. So I don't know if you remember, but of probably 2 years ago now, we did a Martin Popoff roast on the Contrarians, and I picked Slade. Why doesn't he like Slade? He should like Slade. I don't know if you remember that. And
that was a while ago.
That was a while ago. So Martin actually went off because he asked me which album would I recommend that he listened to, and I recommended this one. And he went off, and then the next day or so, he put up a post to say he'd listened to it, and he now finally got why people like Slade. So
I'm surprised Martin never got it, though.
No, well, so am I, but nonetheless. Now, whether he was just doing that to be nice to me, I don't know, but I suspect he was genuine. So it's even converted Martin over a little bit towards Slade.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I find this is a little bit more diverse, much more mature. It seems to be a bit more departure. I don't have anything to. Is it this best work from Slade to this point? Could be for you. Depends on how you look at it. So far, we really haven't had anything that would indicate that they're slipping by any means.
So the songs are, I mean, how does it feel that Hope opens it up and thinks it's a fantastic song? And that was their last, as I say, their last top 10 hit. And it was, it's a piano-driven song again. Builds up brilliantly, I think. Noddy's vocals are great. And then it flips to the second song, which is them kind of monkeys can't swing, which I just think is a brilliant rocker. It's just again, it swings for a start, which is unusual for sort of a heavy rock song, and it is a heavy rock song. I don't know what you think of that song, but I love it. I think it's really good.
Well, who can do heavy rock songs better than Slade?
Yeah.
Parish, I have no issues. I don't have any issues with this record at all, or that track. So
and then Far, Far Away, which was also a single, although it only got to number 15, according to Noel Gallagher, is the best song ever written. So
you got the. Well, Noel should know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, even if you don't like Oasis, you've got to say he knows how, what a good song should sound like.
But
So,
how does it feel? And Far, Far Away, I think shows more of a mature evolution.
yeah,
They're very diverse, but I do think I see growth. The band is growing musically. I really, really wish I could complain about something, but I can't.
and I think
it's
the other
wonderful.
thing, I mean, I quite like, again, this is the there you go, from the back in the day when it came out.
Yeah.
I also just like the glowing suits. I think it actually looks like they're glowing, doesn't it?
Oh, 100%.
I'm not quite sure how they got that effect, but they genuinely look like they're glowing. So I think that's really good.
I don't know how they did
that. And then
if you airbrushed it, I guess. I don't know.
Maybe. And then internally, again, you don't know if you can see it, but there's shots from the film as part of the centerfold.
Oh, very nice.
So that's quite good. So again, I just think a really good album. It's hard for me to be critical, really. And then when it came out again recently, I bought it again, because you have to, don't you? If it comes out again, you've got to buy it again.
Well, you're hardcore, Parish.
This is splatter vinyl. So bit of a show, a bit of an unboxing, so to speak, coming here. But
am I going to have to make you big if you're doing an unboxing? Oh wait, let me make it big. Oh, very nice. And I'm assuming that came out on Polydor.
No, that came out
BMG.
BMG. So the CD came. So the day I got this, I also got the CD version, which has got a couple of extra tracks on.
That's beautiful.
But nice. I don't know. It appealed to me.
I love it, but I wouldn't buy it because I'm just buying the CDs at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah. So if you're going to rate this record, what would you rate it out of 10?
I would give it a 9.5 as well.
All right. I would probably, I guess I'd give it a 9. It's almost there, but it's not a 9, 9.5. What, come on, nitpicking. It'll be interesting to get in our, when we look at the next two records.
Yeah, and they're good albums as well. I mean, kind of sort of spoiler, I guess, and we'll get into the detail. But even though their popularity had dropped away, the quality of the albums didn't. So
yeah, now the reissue. The reissue campaign. Oh, my brain. What the next album after this is? What I forget.
Nobody's Fool.
Nobody's Fool. I've got that on the reissue.
And that's been reissued. And the other one was Whatever Happened to Slade. And I don't think that has been reissued.
Not with the new not in the BMG catalog. And I don't know what the plan. I don't know. Maybe you know. Do you have any idea what the reissue?
No, I don't, because they seem to be releasing in random order. Because the next one I heard they were going to release is Back to Base, which is the one after.
I've got the other one.
Whatever Happened to Slade. So I don't know. I don't quite know what's dictating the order that they do them in.
No, I don't want to.
Because they've released quite a lot. They've re-released quite a lot of the 80s ones already. So they don't seem to be. Well, they aren't. They're definitely not doing them in order.
Well, I've got Whatever Happened to Slade on order, but it's the Is it Salvo? Is that the label?
Could be.
I don't know, but it's got both.
It was. I mean, at the time, it was released on Barn Record, which was
maybe it was on Barn,
which was owned by Jim Lee's brother.
I've got one of those.
So basically, it was basically self-finance, really. It was.
But that's kind of a pricey record. If you go on eBay or you go on Discogs, Whatever Happened to Slade, as far as the CD version, is kind of but what I've read about it, and I haven't listened to it, I'll be ready for the next show. it seems like the fan base, the Slade fan base, really think quite highly of that record.
Yeah, I think it's, as I say, the next two are maybe not quite as good, but are certainly really good.
Yeah.
There you go.
So anyway,
Spoilers.
well, we're getting little tease. So, the Parish rates Old, New, and Borrowed, and Blue, and Slade and Flames. He gives a 9.5. I give 9.5 of the first record, and then I'll give a 9 on Slade and Flames. So, if you're looking to get into Slade, I have no problem. You could start here. You could start at the beginning. Well, I wouldn't start at the beginning.
No, I wouldn't start at the beginning.
Slade or In Flames or Old, New. I think it'd be strong. If you wanted to get that comp that came out, the comp came out right. Let me think of my timeline. That comp, what was it called again?
It was called Sladist.
Sladist. You could start there. We didn't cover that.
That's a good, but that's got the hits, but it's also got a few other songs on it as well, which were on albums. So it's
throw that up while you've got it. Show everybody. There you go. Now I've got that, the BMG reissue of that.
Yeah. Too. So that's definitely not a bad place to start.
So either way, these two records, top notch. Go out, get them if you haven't. If you know these, look, now the things are going off. If you know these records, we want to hear about your experiences with these records in the comment section. So, and as I said before, we're just trying to turn you on to Slade, get them more out there, because the fact that they've influenced so many people, and not very many people here, at least in the States, are aware. So that's what we're doing. The Parish and I are trying to change the world one track at a time.
This came out not just on album, but it also came out on cassette, and also came out on 8-track. So we both know somebody who should be trying to get that on 8-track, I would suggest.
Yeah, Tim Derling probably already has it. Exactly. So anyway, anything else, Parish? We'll wrap this dog up. Anything else?
This is a good place to stop now with Slade for now, because we kind of come to the end of their initial wave of fame, and we're about to go into their wilderness years, and I think therefore we're on for a bumpy ride for the next episode or two.
Well, we'll see what happens. So please stay tuned. Parish, we will I'll let you go because I know you're on a much different time schedule than I am. But Parish will be back in 2 days, because I'm going to put this up tonight. 2 days, we'll be doing a ranking of top 10 ELO tracks. So Marco, Parish, Dave Lubin, and I'm working on getting somebody else on here. We're going to do our top 10 ELO tracks, so that'll be fun. So anyway, please subscribe if you haven't. I want to thank the Parish for doing yet episode 4 with me. We will be back next month for 2 more records, and we will see if we can turn you on to those. So that's what it's about. It's all about Slade right now.
Absolutely.
All right, Parish. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you doing it.
I'll see you in a couple of days. Yeah.
See you in a couple of days. And like I said, everybody, please subscribe, and keep it clean, for crying out loud. All right, we'll see you.